Okay, we're still doing a lot of elbow bumping, and I invite all of those here to feel free to do the same, like this. Well, before Robin was here, I don't know whether you've done it, Robin, but I mentioned that this morning, before we started, someone told me that there's a way also that you can do something with your feet, but but we're not going to demonstrate that here. Okay, now just in terms of the process, as I mentioned earlier, when we get through with this session, we're going to immediately have lunch, and as happens every year for this conference, that wall is going to be pulled back, and there's a buffet lunch, and please go get in line and help yourself to lunch. It turns out, I will just tell you now that I found out late yesterday that Chairman Pai said that because of the coronavirus concerns and protocols at the Federal Communications Commission, and also he's testifying this morning before a Senate committee, that he's not able to be with us, but he did send a video which we're going to show after lunch, and then we're going to and I think Brendan Carr was called to testify even later yesterday, and he's not going to be here, but Commissioner O'Reilly assured me that he's going to be here, and Commissioner Clyburn, and I think with those two we probably will have, I'm sure we'll have a vigorous discussion. That'll be the conversation after we watch Chairman Pai's video. Now, we have with us, I'm delighted to say, Robin Colwell, and many of you in the audience know Robin, but for those of you that don't, I'll give you a bit of background. Robin is currently Special Assistant to the President for Technology, Telecom, and Cybersecurity Policy at the National Economic Council. Actually, this morning when I was doing the introduction, I recited your title, and I said that was quite a mouthful at the time.
Definitely need reading glasses for the card.
Right. Robin was previously Chief Counsel for Communications and Technology at the House Energy and Commerce Committee, as well as Chief of Staff to FCC Commissioner Mike O'Reilly, who's going to be joining us shortly. And she also served on the staffs of other senators and Senate committees. She spent some time in practice at Wiley Ryan, and I know Dick Wiley is sitting here probably eager to hear Robin's remarks. So I'll just say this, and I know Robin will take it in the vein that I intended, but because of my age, I think I can say this. I don't think there are many people that work in our field, our communications policy field and internet policy field, that have done as much as you've done at such an early age in such important positions. So we're delighted to have you with us this morning. And before you stand up, I'm just going to make sure I say that as soon as Robin finishes, we're going to have some remarks from Michelle Connolly. Michelle Connolly, many of you know from her previous appearances, she's a Duke University professor of the practice of economics. Don't get me started on Duke or Duke basketball here. But Michelle, as importantly, at least to me, as that position down at Duke, she's another member of our Board of Academic Advisors, our very distinguished board. You heard earlier from two other members, and I'm always excited to have Michelle here and to listen to her remarks as well. So without further ado, please help me welcome Robin Colwell.
Well, thank you so much, Randy, for that warm welcome, and thanks so much for having me here today. I think we can all agree that Free State Foundation and its founder have done an amazing job with this policy conference and many others through the years. Randy has been a true leader on tech and telecom policy. He has always put together the most insightful events with exciting speakers and given us all some real food for thought, along with some real food, which is, of course, always very much appreciated. I myself have been a frequent flyer at this event for many years, accompanying my bosses as a member of the audience, so it's a real delight and honor to be given the opportunity to address the group this year. As Randy mentioned, after being fortunate enough to follow my passion for tech and telecom policy on both sides of the Hill and the FCC, I took on a new challenge last year. Working at the White House has been the honor and the adventure of a lifetime. I'm very grateful to President Trump and Director Colwell for giving me this opportunity. And I think that all of my previous experiences and having had all those different perspectives from all over town has prepared me very well for my current role, which is what you might call the ultimate exercise in convergence. Integrating the work of the National Economic Council with that of my new and my old friends in the White House, at the agencies, at the independent commissions, in Congress, and in the private sector always makes for an eventful but an ultimately fulfilling day. Broadband Beyond 2020 is the theme of this year's conference, and I know I don't need to convince anyone here of its importance. That connectivity has formed the very backbone of our economy and has unleashed American innovation across every field. It has empowered Americans to connect instantly with each other and with resources never imagined before. In fact, for the first time this year, a number of participants in this conference are watching via live stream on the Free State Foundation Facebook page. So talk about Randy optimizing the connection there. From an instant ride across town when it's raining, to an online course with a leading professor, to a quick consultation with a specialized medical expert from wherever you may happen to be. That's a particularly relevant use case given the news of the last weeks. Broadband is making our lives easier and better. Ensuring access to this miracle of the modern world for every American is a goal many of us in this room have shared and worked together across party lines and across public and private sectors to make a reality for much of our careers. And in 2020, we are recommitting and redoubling our efforts. In the coming days and weeks, we will see some of the important initiatives I worked on from the Hill perspective, and many of you here worked on as well, come to fruition as President Trump signs into law the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act, sponsored by Chairman Pallone and my former boss, Ranking Member Walden. The Cornyn and Warner Secure 5G and Beyond Act, and the Wicker-Peters-Klobuchar Broadband Data Act. Each of these bills moves the ball significantly toward the administration's goals for secure, accessible broadband across the nation. We are making great strides on closing the digital divide between urban and rural America. New data from the FCC just a few weeks ago showed substantial progress in the last 2 years. The number of Americans with no options for at least 250/25 fixed terrestrial broadband service fell by 74%. And the number of Americans with no options for at least 25/3 service fell by 30%. That still leaves 18.3 unserved Americans, so there's clearly more work for all of us here to do. But the Commission took another significant step toward eliminating that number forever with its recent vote to approve the $20 billion Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And the USDA's Reconnect program continues to push connectivity further and further out. As we look ahead to 5G and its promise of ubiquitous, powerful wireless broadband, the administration is pushing aggressively on all fronts to ensure American leadership. In his message to the World Radio Communications Conference last fall, President Trump laid out 3 goals for the United States with regard to 5G wireless networks. First, to deploy rapidly using a free enterprise-driven approach. Strong domestic deployment is an absolute imperative for us, both to support the global trusted marketplace for equipment and services, and to deliver on the promise of 5G across America. As 5G services are rolled out and available to more and more Americans, that will create the palette from which American innovators can paint, showcasing their creative talents as the next generation of transformative applications, the next Uber or Airbnb, what we used to call the killer app, are going to be born right here and rapidly adopted worldwide. The Commission's efforts to streamline siting requirements will be of tremendous value as both the wireline and wireless industries make the necessary investments, rising to the challenge of delivering on this promise. The Commission's upcoming $9 billion 5G fund will help ensure that rural America is not left behind in the evolution to 5G. But also, it is impossible to overstate the critical importance of mid-band spectrum to 5G domestic deployment. The Commission's order setting the C-band auctions for later this year is a huge step in the right direction, and the administration is continuing efforts to ensure sufficient spectrum will be ready and available for 5G. The second goal set by the President is to promote security in all aspects of 5G networks worldwide. The two bills sponsored by Chairman Pallone and Senator Cornyn will be very helpful in ensuring the replacement of untrusted equipment in American networks and setting out a national strategy to secure 5G. These efforts are also extremely helpful in our ongoing engagement with allies and partners worldwide as we share our knowledge of the risks of certain equipment and services and lead by example to proactively address those risks in our own networks here at home. At the same time, we are offering policy and financing resources to our partners in order to facilitate the adoption of trusted alternatives, working with Exim Bank and DFC to take full advantage of their authorities and prioritize 5G projects in the developing world. We look forward to this year's Prague 5G Security Conference to be hosted by the Czech Republic in May as an important forum for further discussions regarding the national security and economic considerations that must be part of each country's evaluation of potential 5G vendors. The third goal is to maintain American leadership in 5G research and development. Here, too, there are some very exciting developments to discuss. The latest market trends in network architecture, disaggregation, interoperability, and virtualization. And O-RAN is a very important part of all those trends. End-to-end virtualization from core to RAN. This represents a true revolution in how wireless networks are built and the cutting edge of the industry. They represent tremendous opportunities in terms of greater efficiency, superior performance, better security, and ultimately a more robust, trusted supply chain. And leading those trends is an impressive and growing list of American innovators, large and small, established and startup. This is very positive development for the United States, as well as the entire trusted ecosystem. And while continuing to push aggressively on domestic deployment and on worldwide network security, we must also recognize the opportunity inherent in the market trends and seek to accelerate innovation, which is what America does best. We will further the conversation, highlighting the opportunities while also considering potential challenges that may lie ahead at a presidential summit on 5G innovation next month. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts with all of you. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Robin, thank you very much. Just as you walk out of the door, I'll just say I've always been pleased to have you at the conference as an audience member, but it was really nice to have you here speaking today, and I look forward to further talks by Robin. You know, earlier, before that last session when Tim Brennan was here, and he referred to 2052, and I did the calculation, and I think I said that would be the 48th annual Free State Foundation Telecom Conference, but I think my math was off, and nobody corrected me, but it would actually be, if this is the 12th, that would be the 44th annual Free State Foundation Telecom Conference. And again, if I'm not here, it gives me comfort to know that people like Robin Colwell and those of her generation will be here to carry on the torch then. Okay, now I'm going to call on Michelle Connolly. She's always a conference favorite, and one day I promise you I'm going to give you your full 50 minutes, just as if you were at Duke University doing a lecture. But we've only got time now for, I'd say, maybe six minutes or 7 minutes before we break for lunch. And I'm going to turn it over to Michelle for whatever remarks she cares to make. Thanks, Michelle. Wherever you.
I find that I speak better when the blood is flowing. I'm going to take advantage of having been here in the earlier session and kind of seeing the things that popped out to me today and try and argue for looking at the big picture, really big picture. We're talking about all this innovation occurring. I was very happy to see Jeffrey Rosen refer to Robert Gordon's work on measuring productivity and growth, and I think that what we are seeing with 5G and the new innovations that were happening and the release of all this additional spectrum, we will end up seeing real increases in productivity growth in the future. I feel very confident of that, so that's great. But we're talking a lot about releasing spectrum and releasing it quickly. And one thing that becomes very obvious as soon as you look at those details is everyone is arguing over how it should be released, what the auction rules should be, what should they be, the market definitions, the market areas be, what should the bandwidths be, what should the interference rules be. All of these things determine who ends up getting access to the spectrum and how they use it. It also influences how easily the secondary market can bring other users to the spectrum. And it ultimately influences how easily the FCC can potentially repurpose the spectrum for other uses that might be more efficient, which we really can't predict at this stage because the technology is evolving and evolving so quickly. So what I wanted to think about is we need to keep an eye on what precedents are being made during this very important and fast-moving process of allocating spectrum. We need to be careful that language is not misused, such as saying, oh, this is a free market allocation that we want, when really this is a reflection of incumbents wanting to protect their own property rights. We want to think about what kind of mechanisms, and this is the big picture question, what kind of mechanisms can the FCC put in place that more generally would assure that in the future, as we need to repurpose spectrum, which has always been an issue for the FCC, how can this be done in a more fluid fashion so that when the needs arise, we don't have 5 years of litigation going on or lobbying, trying to decide what the next best thing is to go on. So that was my deep thoughts.
Okay. Michelle's shallowest thoughts are always deeper than my deepest thoughts. So that's why I always appreciate having Michelle Connolly with us. And again, she is a member of our Board of Academic Advisors, and we're proud of you and all the others as well.